So CES kind of happened last week, and amongst all the concept stuff that's never going to come out and the weird toys that had their toys, we did get some new handheld PCs, including the first SteamOS device that's not made by Valve. It's Sunday, so let's get sensational. I'm Mike, and I'm back to talk about the gaming news. And of course, if we're talking about the gaming news, we gotta talk about CES. Though, in general, it's an electronics show, which is why it's called the Consumer Electronics Show. There were some game-related announcements there. Let's start off with some announcements from Lenovo and Acer. So let's start with Lenovo, since they already had a lot of leaks over the past few months, and we kind of knew what was coming from them ahead of time. So Lenovo announced two handhelds at CES, the Legion Go 2, which doesn't have a release date, they just had a prototype at CES, and then there's the arguably more exciting Legion Go S. I'm going to touch on the main points of each, starting with the Legion Go 2. So the main thing to know about this handheld is it has an 8.8-inch OLED screen with a 144Hz refresh rate. The resolution of the screen isn't mentioned in any of the articles I looked at. But it is going to have VRR, or variable refresh rate, so that's basically where it syncs the refresh rate of the screen with the frame rate from the game, and it makes gameplay feel a lot smoother. It's one of the reasons that I've stuck with the ROG Ally for my daily gaming handheld. They're also doing two different models similar to the ROG Ally. It's going to have a lower end model with a Z2 and a higher end model with a Z2 Extreme, and it'll go up to 32 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes of storage, but they didn't specify how much RAM and storage will be allocated between the cheaper and the more expensive versions of the handheld. So to me, the big surprise with the Legion Go 2 is the OLED screen with a VRR option. I think that's a huge upgrade. A lot of the details about the handheld leaked before, including the Z2 and the Z2 Extreme, and it was expected that they would have handhelds that were going to use both of these chips. Now, the original rumor was that the regular Legion Go was going to stick around and just get upgraded to the Z2, and so that part appears not to be true. But either way, I think on paper it sounds a lot better than the original Legion Go, but again, there's no release date for that one yet. It's just a prototype, so all the stuff could change in the final version of the product. All right, now to move on to their more interesting handheld, which again got leaked, is the Legion Go S. So the Legion Go S is Lenovo's smaller, cheaper, less powerful handheld. It's going to have an 8-inch 1080p-ish LCD screen. The actual resolution is 1920 by 1200, so slightly larger than 1080p when it comes to the vertical real estate, but it's also going to have VRR and run at 120 Hz. Hardware-wise, it's going to have Hall effect thumbsticks and adjustable triggers, and of course, the big difference from the regular Legion Go and the Go 2 is it doesn't have detachable controllers. It's an all-in-one device closer to your typical handheld. Now, as far as the processor, it's going to run either a Z2 Go or a Z1 Extreme, which is still a pretty good chip. Now, the Windows version of the handheld is actually going to start shipping this month. It's supposed to officially release next month. And they basically have two configuration options, with the high-end one being $729.99, and that has a Z2 Go, 32 gigs of RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. And the lower end one is $599.99, and the only difference is it has 16 gigs of RAM. Everything else is basically the same. Now, the other thing with the Windows version of this handheld is it's going to come in white. And the reason that matters is because there's actually another version of the handheld, which makes sense because I kept saying Windows version earlier. But anyway, there is going to be a version that ships with SteamOS out of the box. So the version that ships with SteamOS is going to be black, and it's going to be quite a bit cheaper. It starts at $499.99. Now it's going to have the Z2 Go, 16 gigs of RAM, but only 512 gigabytes of storage, so it'll be a lot closer to the lower end Windows version with just half the storage. But at the price with SteamOS out of the box, it might be worth it. Now, I would assume that at some point, SteamOS will be available to install on the Windows version of the handheld as the same hardware, so it'd be weird to just not give that option, especially because Valve finally announced that a beta version of SteamOS will be releasing soon that allows you to install it on other devices. So it was recently discovered in a beta version of SteamOS that they were testing the button layout for the ROG Ally. And then, of course, Lenovo announces this handheld, so it makes sense that they're finally getting close to releasing SteamOS that can run on other devices other than the Steam Deck. So yeah, it's an exciting time for handheld PCs, with the first non-Valve Steam PC being announced and SteamOS beta for other devices launching soon. But of course, Lenovo wasn't the only company at CES with a handheld. Acer was there too with their handheld. So Acer announced another handheld, the Nitro Blaze 11, which the 11 signifies the size of the screen. So yeah, they're stretching the meaning of handheld. So it's going to have an 11-inch IPS display with 120 Hz refresh rate and a 2560 by 1600 resolution. There was no mention if it's going to support VRR or not, Now, as far as the other spec, it's going to run a Ryzen 7 8840HS with 780M graphics. It'll have 16 gigs of RAM and have configurations for storage up to 2 terabytes, but the initial release is going to be a 512 gig SSD. It's also going to have detachable controllers similar to the Legion Go and the Go 2, which at 11 inches, that kind of makes sense. I mean, I feel like a lot of people would want to just take the controllers off and set that thing on a table, especially if they're on like a plane or something, because like I said, handheld is really being used loosely to describe the size of this thing. Now, they did announce another actual handheld for normal people, which is the Nitro Blaze 8, which is basically the same spec-wise as the 11, but it's going to have a slightly higher refresh rate at 144 Hz, and it doesn't have detachable controllers. Now, of course, they also announced the Nitro Blaze 7 last year, which I covered in one of my news videos, but it still hasn't released yet. So basically, the two new handhelds they announced at CES are just rounding out their lineup, so they'll have the Nitro Blaze 7, 8, and 11. Now, they still don't have exact release dates for any of their handhelds, but they said it should be Q2 of this year. Now, when it comes to pricing, the 11 is going to be $1,100, basically $100 per inch. The 8 is going to be $900, and the 7 is going to be around $800. I think if the 11 were a little cheaper, it'd be a more compelling device. And the 8 and the 7 have a lot more competition, including Lenovo's handhelds, so they don't seem to be the best value either for their price range. But we'll see how well they're received when they finally release, if they finally release. So of course, we got Acer announcing their Windows-based handheld. Lenovo is still doing Windows-based handhelds, even though they have the Legion Go S that's going to be supporting SteamOS. But there just doesn't seem to be a lot of excitement around Windows in general on handhelds, unlike the excitement around SteamOS coming to other handhelds, including the Legion Go S. Well, Microsoft had a few announcements this week themselves at CES, and one of them specifically addressed the handheld space. So at CES, Microsoft mentioned that they wanted to bring Xbox and Windows together and basically focus on making a handheld experience for PC based on the Xbox interface. Now, Microsoft has mentioned this before in passing, making the Windows experience better for smaller screens, but it sounds like they're actually working on something now, which makes sense because even though it's a small part of the market right now, they risk losing it to Valve and SteamOS if they don't do anything. So they didn't have any real details about what they're doing, but they said that they would have more information later this year. Now, I'm not sold on Microsoft making an amazing handheld OS, but anything to make Windows work better on smaller screens would be very helpful. But of course, they want to bring the Xbox brand to more than just Windows handhelds. Their idea has been to have Xbox everywhere, and they've slowly started to roll out Xbox streaming on newer Samsung TVs and certain Fire TV devices over the last couple of years. Well, they announced their next partner, which is LG. So Microsoft is making the Xbox available on new LG TVs. From the articles I looked at, it doesn't give specific model numbers, but I'm guessing it's whatever their current models are and probably their upcoming models. It's the same deal as Samsung. You have to have Game Pass Ultimate and pair a Bluetooth controller up to the TV to play games. Now, what I'm wondering is, with how long it's taken them to do this whole cloud rollout on other devices, if they regret giving up on their streaming device. Either way, the Xbox experience is coming in new places. It's just moving a little bit slow. Kind of like Nintendo when it comes to announcing the Switch 2. But don't worry, because there are plenty of people talking about it at CES. And now we're going to talk about it today. In our final story. Alright, I'm going to keep it real. The Switch 2 leaks this week have been a mess. They've been coming in fast from several sources. And I feel like CES was just the culmination of all the ridiculousness of these leaks. There were so many stories about Switch 2 leaks. It was just too much. It was too much. So this whole round of stories started because an accessory company, Genki, was at CES and they bought a mock-up of the Switch 2, which was obviously 3D printed, but they claimed at the time that this was based on the hardware from the Switch 2 that they saw. But they also mentioned they didn't plan on getting this much attention from bringing the mock-up to CES, which will be important later. Now, I was also surprised that it was getting so much coverage considering all the leaked renders that had been coming out over the last month or two, but it's probably because the journalists were there and had something in their hands they could hold and compare it to the Switch, so they were kind of excited about it. So we had people at CES going crazy over the 3D printed markup, and while all that craziness was happening, a GameStop employee hopped on Reddit with a leaked picture from a GameStop office computer that shows some memory cards they have listed in their system for the Switch 2. And the only reason that was notable is because they were micro SD express cards, which are way faster than the current micro SD cards that the Switch supports. So the news is already going wild because Genki bought that Switch 2 mock-up to CES. Then at the same time, you had the GameStop employee that decided to leak the SD card thing online. And basically Nintendo, they finally decided to say something, but only about the Genki mock-up thing, not about anything else. So Nintendo spoke to CNET Japan and said that the render is unofficial and Nintendo did not provide them, as in Genki, the hardware. Now, out of all the rumors and leaks that came out, they decided to comment on this one. I mean, D-Brand came out and said that they had the actual hardware and announced their case, and Nintendo didn't say anything about it. And all these rumors and leaks are all based on the same hardware. So yeah, it's weird that they specifically said something about Genki instead of just addressing the leaks in general, especially because there have been a lot of them going on recently. Well, after Nintendo put out their statement, Genki then backtracked on what they said earlier, that the mock-up was based on hardware that they'd actually seen, and said it was just based off the leaks that were already out there online. So either they were lying initially or they're lying now, because Nintendo is aware that they somehow obtained hardware or saw it without their permission, so they're afraid that Nintendo will come after them. And that kind of lines up with what they said earlier about like, oh, we didn't expect to get this much attention by bringing this to CES. So I don't think that they were intending to get like this many eyes and news stories talking about it in the first place. And also, it's not irrational to think that Nintendo would come after them, because Nintendo goes after every being possible, both living and non-living, when it comes to protecting their IP. It doesn't matter if you're dead or not. If you wrong Nintendo, they're gonna take you to court. But anyway, at the end of the day, the only real new information to come out was that the new Switch is probably going to support faster SD cards. Well, let me know what you think about the news and announcements from CES this week. Let me know if there's anything that I didn't cover that you found interesting. Again, let me know down below. And if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to tell a friend, tell a coworker, like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification button to be notified when I drop a video or a live stream. And I always do at least 2 things at the same time. Peace.